Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to talk about smashing resonances with EQ. Resonances are something that occurs when you are recording in real life. So you're not going to run into this with any sort of virtual instrument, the drummer track, any sort of MIDI, anything. None of those are going to have resonances. But if you're recording with a guitar, if you're recording with a mic in a room, you have the chance of having resonances, which are essentially just frequencies that are kind of overly exaggeratedly picked up in the recording. And this could come from the shape of the room, having certain reflections that bounce back over and over and over again and kind of create build-up at certain frequencies in your recording. It could have to do with the shape of the guitar, the body of the guitar, or just the mic placement relative to it. It could have to do with the capsule on the microphone. It doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is that we figure out what they are, where they are in the sound, and we get rid of them. This isn't something I want you to worry about insanely, but if you have something that's just really annoying in your sound and you can't figure out where it's coming from, this will help you smash it. Just get it gone. Okay, let's look at what we're talking about here. So we have just a basic acoustic guitar recording here. It's recorded just fine. It's a fine take. So listen to a little bit of that. Okay, so there's a couple frequencies in there that are just kind of always present, and they're really highlighted on some chords, but they're always there a little bit in a way that's just kind of standing out too much. So we're using EQ to just cut them out. So listen to it without this on again, and then I'm going to turn this EQ on, and notice how it just clears up the sound. You might not have even realized there were issues, but as soon as we turn on this EQ, bam, it's gone. Kind of crazy, right? It's kind of crazy. Okay, so there's a few resonances in here that I picked up on. This is the main offender, if you will. 4 resonance cuts are the most resonance cuts that I'll typically do. This is definitely a lot, but in this case I felt like it needed it, and it really cleaned it up, and you heard how immediate the impact was. But as I said, this one is definitely the main offender. So let's listen to just what that one frequency is doing. I'm going to turn off these other resonance cuts. And if I boost this up, so this little area right here, if I boost it up with gain, woo! Take that out. So if I just bypass this, it just cleans it up, right? So this frequency right here, it's just resonating too much. So it's kind of always present. It's kind of always overwhelming the sound of the acoustic, and it's kind of distracting from the overall tone of this acoustic. So all we did is we cut that out. We have similar things if we listen on here. So we'll listen to these other cuts here. I'll keep that one in so it's not as annoying. So this one, cut that out. See, that definitely helps shape that little area right there. We have one that's a little bit lower here. This one's a little bit less extreme in terms of how much we're cutting. You just hear that one pop up every once in a while, but it's never really helping. And then the final one is just up here at the top. So just a little cut. And that's it. We just smashed all of the things that were getting in the way of our acoustic tone, and we took it from sounding like this to this without even starting into kind of tonal EQ and doing larger EQ moves that shape the tone of the acoustic. This is what's called surgical EQ, and we're really cutting out things that are getting in the way. And sometimes it's really, really important. It's not always necessary, especially, again, if you're working with virtual instruments, the drummer, anything like that. Those aren't going to have these resonances. But if you've recorded something live, whether it be electric guitar, acoustic guitar, vocals, anything with a microphone or some sort of element in the real world into your recording, it's possible that you're going to develop some resonances. Now, if you don't hear them, if they're not standing out to you, don't worry about it. This isn't a huge deal. But if you have something that's like driving you crazy, let's fix them. Now, how do you find the actual frequency to cut? Well, let's go through that process really quickly. So we'll just start with a completely fresh EQ, and we're just going to go through finding these frequencies. So we're going to sweep in order to find them. But sweeping can be kind of a double-edged sword. It can be extremely powerful to find the thing that's bothering us, but if we're not intentional in our approach to it, then it can actually end up creating kind of a weird monster of EQ that's not helping the sound, because listen as we sweep how everything sounds weird in this acoustic guitar. I mean, I'd cut every single one of those frequencies if I'm just aimlessly doing this. We need to listen really closely for something that's jumping out beyond the normal. It's a little more extreme than everything else. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that we need to bypass and check with and without the EQ if it's helping, if it's getting rid of things. This can be a little bit laborious, so be slow and intentional, because you don't want to just cut to cut, because you'll end up with having a sound that sounds very unnatural, and you're likely cutting things you don't need to be cutting, which is actually hurting the sound and making it harder to get a really full, great sounding mix. So those are the big caveats aside as we're getting into this. Now, with these boosts here, we're just gonna pull it up and sweep and pay attention as we're listening to what's sounding really weird. We know that there's definitely some stuff in the high frequencies. It sounds like maybe there's some stuff in kind of the mid frequencies here as well. I don't really think we're hearing anything in the lows or anything like that in this recording. So we're really going to be focusing on kind of the mids, upper mids, and a little bit of the mid range here. So we're just going to take this band and we're going to boost and sweep and listen to what we're hearing. That's that bad one. It's a little bit right there. See, it really spikes up. So I was feeling like there was some up here, but as I brought it back down, it doesn't sound out of place to me. So that's the important part here is don't focus just on what it sounds like when it's boosted. Focus on what it sounds like when you take it back away. You know, so if it sounds weird when it's like this, okay, well now take this back down. That doesn't sound weird to me anymore, you know? So balance it a little bit. Now, this frequency definitely jumped out to me. Looks like there's an EQ filter right there. So let's go to this one to start. And we're gonna make it a little bit narrower. So we know we're right around 1000 hertz here, 1K. So let's sweep in this area and really zone in on the frequency that's just driving us crazy. Oh yeah. We want to make it as narrow as we can. Right there. And you just want to pull this down to cut it out. So now we need to bypass and see if it really was that was driving us crazy. Oh yeah, that's much better. when that's out. So that's the big step, is just make sure that it's actually helping the sound. And what I always find is that once I'm kind of tuned to the frequency as it's boosted up here, if I turn this off and I'm still hearing it, then that's a good indicator to me that I need to cut it. So we're going to go ahead and cut it down here, down to about -12, -13 seem to cut it all the way out. All right, and then I think we noticed some weirdness in this mid-range here. Let's see if we can find that. There's definitely something right there. All right, so we'll narrow our band. Let's turn this off and that one's definitely not as extreme, so we won't do as large of a cut here. It helps cut it out though. Make this a little bit narrower. Awesome. All right, and then let's see if we got one more in the low end. Definitely in the mids, not the low end. This bothers me a little bit, so we'll cut that out a little bit. Again, less of a cut for both of these, but cutting them out, making them a little more balanced in the context of the mix. And then we'll zoom in here. I think there was something in the upper frequencies, upper mids really. So this is it's just a little more extreme right there. Bugs my ears a little bit. Crazy. That's it. Smashed them. Got rid of all of them. And again, bypassing is huge here. Don't cut more than you need to. Bypass to make sure it's actually helping the sound. But sweep until you hear a frequency jumping out at you. Check without it on to you're still kind of hearing it in the sound. If it's still in the way, making it sound a little less clean, cut it out. Now, I want to show you something that's pretty interesting to me in this. And that's that there's roughly a mathematical equivalence in here, and that has to do with the way sound works. So if you look at this is 530-ish hertz. This is 1060 hertz, so almost exactly double. This is 2K, so not quite double, but very, very close to double. That likely has to do with what this resonance actually is, how it's bouncing around in the room or in the mic capsule. These frequencies tend to be in multiples of each other. So if you're struggling to find it, you think you're hearing something else, go check a multiple. So if it's 530, try 1060. Whatever the frequency is for you that you have isolated, see if you can find either a multiple or a reverse multiple. So if it's 1060, try 530 and see if you can find something in that range. And again, if you're not, take the cut back out because you don't want to cut aimlessly. But if it's going to help your sound, then that's great. Once you've done this, then you can get into the fun EQ, the tonal EQ that's really shaping the sound of your acoustic to help it fit better in the context of your song. So, you know, we've cut out our weirdness, and now we get to do the EQ, the brightness, and cutting out some of the mid-range that's getting in the way, and cutting out the lows to make space for our bass. That EQ can really begin once you've cut these resonances. So I like to cut these resonances either when I'm recording or before I actually really start EQing and mixing. That way I can EQ freely. But sometimes if I just have maybe one resonance, then I might include it in my main EQ process. But keep that in mind. Think of these EQs as different. This is very surgical. This is very tonal. If you've ever heard those terms, that's what we're talking about. This is a really precise surgical move. It's like a knife, cutting into it with a knife, smashing it. And this is big tonal moves to help shape it to sound the way you want and sound the way it should in the context of your mix. Now, if you're looking at all this and you're like, what even is EQ? Well, I want to give you something to help with that. I've put together a completely free EQ cheat sheet that walks through everything you need to know to get started with EQ. It's completely free from link in the description below, so be sure to grab that. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever cut a resonance? It's kind of crazy, right? The first time I did it, it was so satisfying. Just immediately smashing it, and all of a sudden my mix sounds cleaner. So have you ever cut one before? Or do you think you might need to try to find some of these in your recordings? Let me know in the comments below. If this video is helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time.